Stanley, Scuba, Sailing, and Adventures. I appreciate you being here with me to log an entry in the travel journal. If this is your first time, please hit that subscribe button. There are dives where something extraordinary seems to be waiting for me. A shark passes through the blue. A sea turtle appears over the reef. A ray lifts from the sand. And then there are dives like this one. Warm water. Pretty good visibility. A shallow rock reef. And hundreds of small fish going about their lives as though my arrival meant absolutely nothing. There wasn't one dramatic moment that defined this dive. No single encounter that I could point to and say, there, that's why I came. Instead, there was the reef. And the longer I stayed there, the more I began to wonder if that was enough. Maybe more than enough. Because when I first descend onto a reef, it's easy to start searching. I look beneath ledges, I scan the bottom, I look out into the blue. My eyes move from one place to another, wondering what might appear next. Even when the water is clear, I keep looking farther. Maybe that's simply part of diving. I know there are things down here I might never see. Something could be hiding beneath a rock. Something could swim past just outside my field of view. So I keep searching. But on this dive, after a while, I started paying less attention to what might appear and more attention to what was already there. Small fish moved above the reef. Some stayed close to the bottom. Others wandered a little farther before turning back. There were flashes of color everywhere, but most of them were easy to overlook. Nothing seemed to demand attention. And perhaps that's why the reef began to feel different. It wasn't putting on a show. It wasn't waiting for me. It certainly didn't seem concerned with whether I was impressed. It was simply continuing. The fish moved. The water moved. The sunlight reached down through the surface. And the reef went on being a reef. There's something peaceful about watching a place that doesn't need anything from me. I don't have to understand it. I don't have to change it. I don't even have to find anything. I can simply be there. I think that's one of the things I've always loved about diving. On land, I'm almost always headed somewhere. There's another destination, another task, another thing I'm supposed to be doing. But underwater, especially on a shallow reef like this, those things begin to feel very far away. Movement becomes slower. Sound becomes quieter. Even time seems a little less important. And eventually, if I stay long enough, the urge to search begins to fade, and I start noticing smaller things. A fish that would have seemed ordinary a few minutes earlier. The way the sunlight changes the color on the rocks. The movement of the water across the bottom. A patch of sand between everything else. None of these things are particularly rare. Maybe that's the point. I often wonder why I can become so focused on finding the extraordinary that I sometimes stop noticing the ordinary things surrounding it. Maybe I'm afraid I'll miss something, the big encounter, the perfect photograph, the story I will tell when I get home. I've certainly done it. I've spent dives looking into the distance, hoping a shark might appear. I've searched beneath ledges. I've watched the blue. I've wondered what might be around the next part of the reef. And there's nothing wrong with that. Curiosity is part of the adventure. It's one of the reasons I descend in the first place. But sometimes, I wonder what happens while I'm looking somewhere else. Because a reef doesn't reveal itself all at once. I can swim over it quickly and see one place, or I can slow down and see another. The reef hasn't changed, only my attention has. Stay in one place for a little while, and the small fish begin to appear differently. Patterns become noticeable. Movement that first seemed random starts to have a rhythm. Things I passed without noticing suddenly become interesting. The longer I look, the more there seems to be. Maybe patience isn't really about waiting for something to happen. Maybe sometimes it's about staying somewhere long enough to notice that something already is. Down here, there are no signs pointing toward the important things. Nothing tells me where to look. The reef doesn't separate the spectacular from the ordinary. A tiny fish moving across the rocky bottom occupies the same water as everything else. And somehow, that makes the searching feel different. Because what am I really searching for? I don't know. Maybe that's one of those questions that's better left unanswered. Perhaps the answer changes depending on why I came here. Sometimes I dive because I love marine life. Sometimes it's photography. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes I want to explore. And sometimes I simply want to know what exists beneath a surface that most people never cross. Maybe sometimes I don't know what I'm looking for until I find myself surrounded by it. That happened to me a little on this dive. There wasn't one moment when everything suddenly made sense. It was quieter than that. I simply realized that I had stopped looking for the next thing. I wasn't waiting for something larger to swim into view. I was watching what was already in front of me. A small fish, the water. Nothing dramatic, and yet I didn't feel like anything was missing. That's an interesting feeling, because I spend a lot of time looking toward the next horizon. There are always more places I want to dive, more reefs I want to see, more oceans I want to explore. And I hope that never changes. Curiosity is one of the reasons I keep doing this. But perhaps curiosity doesn't always have to pull me toward something new. Sometimes it can simply make me look more carefully at where I already am. And this reef seemed to reward that. Not in some spectacular encounter, but with details. The longer I stayed, the more I noticed. A color I had missed before, a fish disappearing behind a rock, another appearing from somewhere I had been watching. The movement of water across the bottom. Small lives continuing all around me. None of it seemed hurried. Maybe that's another reason patience feels different underwater. I know every dive is temporary. The air in my cylinder is finite. Eventually, I have to return to the surface. Knowing that could make me want to hurry, see more, cover more distance, search a little farther. But swimming farther doesn't necessarily mean seeing more. Sometimes it only means passing more. There's a difference. On a reef filled with small life, that difference becomes easier to notice. I could swim across a large section of the bottom and remember very little of it. Or I could slow down and discover just how much was already there. I think about that sometimes after a dive, not as a lesson, just as a question. How many things do I pass because I'm searching for something else? How often do I assume the interesting thing must be somewhere farther ahead? I don't know. Maybe that's why places like this have a way of quieting me. For a little while, there's nowhere else I need to be. There's only the reef, this water.
Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment.